Okay, so the webinar is now live, and what that means is that the people who are attendees are jumping in right now one by one. You can see the participants kind of climbing. So welcome for everybody who is coming in right now and who's joining us for this webinar. It's going to be a good one. We've got an unbelievable panel here. It's going to be a little bit of a heartstring puller for sure. So thanks everybody for showing. What I'm going to do is just take a minute here to get us set up, at least try to get us set up with Facebook. Hopefully we won't have to call Mark Zuckerberg on a cell phone again this week. It'll just work. So bear with us here while I do that. Problems already. All right. I tell you what, while I'm working on that, why don't we go ahead and roll? So Karen and Nicole, why don't you take us away and let's get this webinar started.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeff. Welcome everyone to our October 29th End the Silence, Let's Talk About Suicide webinar. Welcome to Team Up for Hope. We are a nonprofit organization that was created to help address the impact of mental illness, substance use, and suicide within our communities. We are doing this by raising funds and awareness for local nonprofit organizations at the forefront of this crisis. Team Up for Hope was partnered with NAMI Orange and NAMI Sussex. Both of these organizations assist with access to services and treatment, supports awareness and research, advocates for legislation and the rights of people with mental illness. In addition, they educate and provide support to the family members and the loved ones who care for them. Team Up for Hope would like to thank you for joining us this evening for our fourth and last webinar of our four-part series of Breaking the Silence and Ending the Silence. This evening, our presenters will be addressing End the Silence, Let's Talk About Suicide. We'd like to start off with introducing Dana Sanesi. She is the president of NAMI Orange, family support group facilitator, a teacher, NAMI Family to Family and NAMI Basics, End the Silence presenter, Families Helping Families coordinator at Garnet Health Medical Center, Board of Directors for NAMI NYS, member of Crisis Intervention Team and instructor of Youth Mental Health First Aid. Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Karen. Again, my name is Jeff, the slides, number 3.
Yeah, I hear you. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about suicide. Suicide is a self-destructive behavior with an intent to kill themselves. And there are some contributing factors. Some of the contributing factors are economic crisis, that is like financial burden or anything economical crisis, opiate epidemic, social media, and decreased access to mental health and medical care. There is a serious decrease in the mental health services. Number 7. Thank you. And there are some risk factors when it comes to suicide. When somebody has tried if they have the previous suicide attempts and the family history of suicide, if somebody has any history of the suicide in their family, psychiatric illnesses such as depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, that can be anything, anxiety. If someone has alcohol and substance use disorders, if someone has a serious physical illnesses such as like heart conditions, or chronic pain, the continuous chronic pain, the feelings of hopelessness and isolation, someone who feels like empty, there's like, there's no family, especially with the people with no families, that can happen. The next slide, please. Number 8. And also, like if someone feels like they're a burden to their family members, for example, when somebody is kind of disabled, right, for example, they might feel that they might feel that they're a burden to other person. Experiencing the severe emotional pain. Sometimes the emotional pain can be very powerful. For example, the depression, anxiety, bipolar, all those things. Impulsive or aggressive tendencies. History of child abuse, sexual abuse. Also having the firearms in the family. If any of the family has the firearms in their house, there are higher risk of suicide. Also, some of the stresses involving the loss, if somebody has a, losing their loved ones, are going through extreme stress, that can also lead to the risk factors. Number 11, the warning signs. Now, there are some signs of the warning signs, and usually when somebody is suicidal, they tend to tell somebody, someone close to their, a friend or someone close in the family. They might indicate that they have that suicidal behavior. They're planning for a suicide. So they might give some indications, and the suicide signs can be noticeable, that can be heard, and that can be observed. Next slide, please. That is number 12. Sorry, number 11. Number 11, please. Okay. Some of the warning signs again. Some of the warning signs of suicide. Somebody can, tell somebody else, hey, I'm planning for this. I don't feel like living. So they may feel like there is no tomorrow. So they think that their life is over. So it can be the verbal suicide threats, expressions of hopelessness and helplessness. So they feel kind of trapped. It's like, they are in a black hole. They must have tried everything else, but if nothing works, they might feel hopeless, helpless. They might feel guilt or shame. Talking about being a burden to others, increasing use of alcohol or drugs, which is a very common thing. And the risk-taking behaviors, such as driving recklessly, excessive drinking, those are some of the risk-taking behaviors. Again, as I said before, experiencing severe emotional pain. Number 12. And if somebody has the depression, depression is one of the leading cause of suicide. Again, when someone is depressed, feeling empty, feeling like as if there's no tomorrow, hopelessness, all those things can happen when a person is depressed. Severe anxiety and the panic attacks. Problems with sleeping, showing the, anger or talking about seeking revenge. That's also, it's one of the warning signs. And also saying a final goodbye to the family and friends, like writing notes, saying that you will not see me tomorrow, the notes like that. And also lack of interest in the future plans. There's no motivation, what they want to be, what they want to do in their future. Also, they might even lose interest in their usual activities, what they used to do it, what they were so much passionate about, they may not able to do that. So they may lose that interest. Number 13. Number 13, 1-3, the factors that help. Thank you. Some of the factors what can help to protect against suicide is having the social support. Social support in the sense like, from family, from friends, from the uh, faith communities, any of the social support, like going out, meeting people, those kind of things. Family, having the close-knit families, the family connectedness, the sense of responsibility, taking responsibility to take care of their family or children in the home. So they feel kind of, that they are responsible. They think that they have to be there to take care of other people. Getting involved with the faith communities, with religion, seeking mental health treatment regularly. So number 14, following up with the doctors, following up with the therapist, having their, regular calls with their case managers. Those are all like, also the protective factors. And also when someone has the problem solving and coping skills. So if somebody has a problem, they might sit back and think, hey, how can I solve this problem? How can I cope with this? So them trying the different things to solve their issues by communicating with others like doctors and therapists and their caseworkers might help. And also finding the purpose to continue their life. Having that kind of a mentality definitely is a protective factor. And having the reduced access of lethal means, like, having the firearms in the house, that can greatly reduce the suicide. Number 15, please. And why don't some suicidal individuals seek treatment? So some people think that there is no need to go for the treatment. I mean, they think that it's not important. I mean, they think that their feelings, their thoughts they may just dismiss it, thinking that it's not important. Wanting to handle the problem on their own, they think that they can handle their own problems. They don't need any help. I don't need any help. I can handle my own problems. And also, they may think that the problem is they're kind of underestimating the problem, believing that the treatment is not effective. They think the treatment is not going to help them. And also they think one might think that problem will get better without the treatment. And the biggest thing is the stigma and the discrimination attached to the suicidal ideations with the mental health issues. Going to a psychiatrist, they may think that it's a shame. It can be logistics, like financial burden or transportation can be a problem. People insulting them, name calling, using stigmatizing words. So all those because of, and also the peer pressure, bullying in the schools, those are all can, bring up stigma and the discrimination, and it really makes people think that they don't want to go for the treatment. There are some, number 18. Number 18. Okay. So if you have a friend, if you see someone with a either suicidal ideations, suicidal attempts, or if you see any warning signs, you can contact National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That is 1-800-273 8255. And they will have the counselors that you can talk to somebody. Definitely there is help available. They can also connect you to the nearest person, nearest the counselors or any kind of the providers what you are looking for. Also number 18. Okay, number 21. Okay, this is the text. Anyone can text. If if a youth is feeling suicidal, if anyone is feeling like suicidal ideations, they can always text this. This is a free service. It's open 24/7 and it's throughout United States. So when you call them, I mean, everything stays confidential. They don't have to give their names or the address or anything. So somebody is there to listen. Somebody is there to help the person. Number 23. Okay, this is my favorite one. This is the resource in Orange County here. So if someone can call 311, say that if they are going through any kind of distress, it can be a mental health issue, it can be, the suicidal ideations, they can call 311. And 311 is a teamwork of three biggest agencies in Orange County. That is Independent Living Center, which is a peer agency. They will send a peer if it is necessary. There is a Mental Health Association and Access Supports for Living. So all these three agencies combined together, they are working, in a place. It's a call center, so they can, depending on the situation, they will dispatch the peer support. They can even send the mobile mental health. I mean, somebody will come as a check on them to make sure everything is okay. So number 24. So that's number 24. Okay. Okay, there is a misconception here. When we talk about suicide, if we ask a person, are you thinking about suicide? People think that we are putting the idea of suicide into their heads, but it is not true. By asking that question, you are actually saving a life. The person feels that he is heard, he is understood. And by asking the direct questions, are you suicidal? Are you planning to kill yourself? So that kind of information definitely helps the person to feel understood and to be heard. And also the National Suicide Prevention Line has recently initiated this Be the One campaign. And if anyone can go to www.betheone.com, there is a lot of information there and one can definitely get help on that one. And also, this initiative gives the family and loved ones a plan with the 5 action plans. That is number 25. Slide number 25. Okay, so these are the 5 action plans. So this is how we can all help somebody who is feeling suicidal, asking them directly if they are thinking about suicide. We want to be really direct with them, keeping them safe by reducing their access to the firearms, being there for them, letting them know that I'm here to take care, to listen to you. I'm here. I really care about you. I'm concerned about you. Helping them to connect with the support and also the professional help. Following up to see how they are doing. Also, the suicide is really considered as an immediate danger. So these are the action steps anyone can do to help a person. Number 29. Okay, these are the things what not to do. Trying to cheer up the person who has the suicidal ideations, who is thinking about suicide. Telling the person to snap out of it. That is like dismissing his feelings, assuming that the situation will take care of itself. That is not true. Just that is again, minimizing the problem, minimizing the danger. Trying to promising that person that it's going to be confidential. When it comes to suicide, there is no confidentiality. Leaving the person alone. If the person is acting in a threatening way, just leaving the person alone, unattended, when a person, anything can happen any minute. So those are some things what not to do. And also, when you're helping somebody else, you should also take care of yourself, because dealing with the person, helping a person with the suicidal ideations, can be very stressful. So your self-care is also very important. Number 31. These are some of the recent data, which came out just last month. Suicidal ideation are the highest among youth, especially like between 11 to 17 years old, among LGBTQ and the youth population. In September 2020, over half of 11 to 17-year-olds reported having thoughts of suicide or self-harm. From January to September 2020, 77,470 youth reported experiencing frequent suicidal ideation, including 27,980 LGBTQ plus the youth. Number 32. Number 32. Okay, since the COVID, which started in March, over 178,000 people have reported frequent suicidal ideation. 37% of the people reported having thoughts of suicide more than half or nearly every day in September of 2020. That's only last month. And the anxiety and depression are skyrocketing. So thank you all. That's about it.
Thank you so much, Danu, for that presentation and that information. It was very, very good. Thank you. I'd like to introduce now Robert Cubby. He is a member of the Board of Trustees for NAMI Sussex. He's a facilitator with the PTS Connection Support Group for Veterans and First Responders, and he's a trainer of the Sussex County Crisis Intervention Team. Robert, thank you for being here this evening, and I am passing it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this important program. Jeff, could you pull up my PowerPoint, please? Second slide, please. All right, my presentation is going to focus on the prevalence of suicide in law enforcement and the military, but a lot of what was discussed thus far will also enforcement in the military. Some of the helpful signs and symptoms. One thing that we need to keep in mind that less than 10% of all departments in the United States have preventive measures for suicide. In 2020, law enforcement experienced 63 suicides and 141 line of duty deaths. What I mean by line of duty deaths would be the deaths that would normally be expected in the profession of policing. In 2019, we had 228 suicides and 110 line of duty deaths. In 2018, 167 suicides and 145 line of duty deaths. In 2017, when they started first promulgating these statistics, 174 suicides and 129 line of duty deaths. You may find that interesting that we never totaled those suicide occurrences before, but it is extremely hard to get departments to cooperate, to bring forth that information about the suicides of their officers. So we had a lot of problems in getting numbers, but it's becoming more forthcoming with the departments. Also, in the last entry that I saw from the Veterans Administration, we lost in 2017, we lost 17 veterans per day, or a total of 6,139 veterans to suicide. That's more than we've lost in both the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars. Next slide. Signs to consider. can I tell someone is feeling suicidal? They may be threatening to kill or harm themselves, looking for ways to kill themselves, talking, writing, or posting online thoughts on dying or suicide, hopelessness, rage, anger, seeking revenge, acting recklessly, risky behaviors, feeling trapped, no way out, no place to turn. Next slide, please. There's more signs that we can consider are withdrawing from friends, family, and society, anxiety, agitation, unable to sleep or sleeping all the time, dramatic changes in mood, no reason for living, no sense of purpose in life. People may show one or many of these signs. Some may show signs not on this list. Next slide. All right. One of the organizations that supplies training for civilians and police officers is known as Safe Talk. It is a one-day classroom, and they will immerse you in suicidal scenarios, and then they would ask you to speak of what your actions would be if you were confronted with these situations. Next slide. You might be wondering, most persons thinking of suicide want help to stay alive. People thinking of suicide find ways to invite help from others. Invitations are often missed, dismissed, or avoided. The best way to find out if someone is thinking of suicide is to ask directly. That was brought up before. It was interesting that when I took the class of Safe Talk, we had clinicians in the class, we had police officers, we had people from both mental health and law enforcement, and no one in the classroom could even speak the word suicide. They danced around it, and you need to ask that question. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? Next, asking directly about suicide will not give someone the idea. Avoiding direct and open talk about suicide is not helpful and could be dangerous. Anyone could have thoughts of suicide. Everyone can learn to help. Next slide. How should I talk with someone who is suicidal? Tell the person that you care and that you want to help. Express empathy. Clearly state that thoughts of suicide are often associated with treatable mental disorder, as this may instill a sense of hope. Tell the person that thoughts of suicide are common and do not have to be acted upon. Next slide. How can I tell if the situation is more serious? So some people may just say that they've had it, they want to end it, but they have no intention of carrying it out. If it becomes more serious, you may want to ask, or you may want to ponder, have you decided how you will kill yourself? When will you do it? Do you have a plan? Have you been using alcohol or drugs? Have you made a suicide attempt in the past? This is normally these are not spur of the moment decisions. Normally these are well thought out. Normally these are planned. Next slide. A good measuring device that can be used by lay people as well as professionals is the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. You can take this online. It took me about 36 minutes to do the training. It's a self-test, and if you get 8 out of 10 questions right, they give you a certificate saying that you're use this rating scale. If you feel you need a more guided approach to asking these questions and a more guided tool, the scale can be used with a minimum of training online. It can be used by lay people as well as professionals. Through a series of yes and no questions, you'll be guided as to what actions to take if the answers lead you to believe the suicide ideation is real. Basically, the first 2 questions, if you see a yes on both of those, they're serious. And again, this has been measured out, and it's been utilized with a great deal of success. Next slide, please. All right, so the references and some of the places that I looked for information, the mental health first aid course, the Columbia Severity Rating Scale, and Safe Talk. And as I said, you can access Safe Talk as to where you can get this training at www.livingworks.net. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you for your knowledge and sharing this information with us this evening. I did want to mention to everyone attending that if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we'll be answering all questions at the end of the presentations. Right now, I'd like to introduce Daniel Mcquaid. He is a local artist. He's a sculptor. He's a photographer. He is an advocate for mental health awareness. And he also is the creator of the Under the Skin project. So Daniel, I'm passing it over to you, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. So I'm going to talk about a little about the experiences I went through that have to do with my suicidal thoughts and my past. So a lot of my mental health problems, they started around puberty, middle school, struggling with self-harm, OCD, active suicidal thoughts, and not understanding my feelings and emotions, and like only thinking that the only way to deal with them is through death, because I didn't have any other knowledge or coping skills to deal with my emotions. Going into high school, I had active suicidal thoughts. You know, basically I had like a plan to carry out my suicide. They eventually kind of toned down and became like passive, so I didn't really have a plan anymore. But my OCD flared up again, which became an issue, and it was very frustrating for myself to deal with it. And I eventually went to therapy for it and was put on antidepressants, which was good and helped me through the rest of high school. But I still had, you know, the suicidal thoughts, and, you know, I would joke a lot about dying, being miserable to my friends. You know, I didn't see any issues with, you know, joking about it. Neither did anyone else, or they just didn't feel comfortable, you know, bringing that kind of thing up. Then I graduated high school. I never had a plan to go to college, so I'm already on a different route than most people, and that's kind of stressful because, you know, there's not a lot to compare yourself to, really. I'm an artist, so, you know, I've always planned to have like a very different route to succeed in life, and through that I went into a year-long internship, and that became really stressful for me. And I neglected my health, my mind, body, soul. You know, I became very irritated and at like the smallest things, which was tough. And then like those things led up to me deciding to take myself off my medication, which was a bad decision on my part, and I definitely don't recommend. That just sent me really off the grid. I really wasn't able to control my emotions. I just was so frustrated with myself again, having many suicidal thoughts, you know, many car rides home from work crying. It was a very difficult time. There came a point where late one night on my way home from work, I decided that, you know, today was the day and that I had enough, and I was going to go through with my plan to end my life. But before I was able to, some flashing lights came out of nowhere, and there ended up being a police officer who, I guess, stopped me. He didn't really know what was going on. we just kind of had the conversation, the basic, here's license, registration, and then I left. I just think that situation is very strange to me. It left a very, it stuck with me, because I just thought it was strange that he popped out of nowhere, and I was in the middle of a state park to begin with, so you wouldn't really expect anybody to be around. And after going through that whole extreme situation with my emotions, I decided that I needed to take a month off my internship, which basically was just me laying in bed all day. And it came a point where I was doing the quizzes online about depression, like if you had depression or any mental illness stuff, and some stuff was clicking in my head. So I was like, I think I don't want to continue to lay in bed. I don't want to be miserable all the time. And I thought it wouldn't hurt to seek out help. And I went to therapy, which helped a lot. And it slowly helped, but when you first start therapy, you have to get comfortable talking with the person that you're with, and it's definitely a difficult situation to just open up to somebody. One thing that I realized right after I started my therapy was the implications of the words "I want to die, please kill me," or a similar phrase. I would say that as a response to very simple situations that I could easily have, fixed or changed myself. And I kind of realized that, when I use those words, I affect my subconscious, unknowingly pushing the concept of wanting to die even more into my head. So I ended up, understanding that, making the conscious effort to cut out phrases like that from my vocabulary. And, that helped improve a lot of things very slowly as well. And after starting therapy, I was still very uncomfortable with taking the antidepressants because of what I had dealt with before, and the side effects. So I ended up trying a more natural, holistic way with supplements, diet, exercise, and which worked great during the summer, but seasonal depression hit, and it just made me go right back to those suicidal thoughts and in wanting to die, and also being very afraid of my own mind, afraid I was going to do something that I wasn't able to control. And it got to a point where during the winter, it was probably around New Year's, that I thought I couldn't control my own emotions, that I would end up severely hurting myself without thought. So I was very close to admitting myself to a hospital. That's something I kind of really have never told anyone either. But for whatever reason, I was able to push through it, and I was able to talk about it in therapy. And then at that point, I realized that maybe it's time to try an antidepressant again. And doing that gave me the extra push I needed to get out of the winter season and back into the summer and spring. And then the next winter kind of came, and it was in the fall, I can already feel myself starting to slip back down. So I was like, I think I need to up my dosage. And I did that, and that gave me that final push to keep me going through the winter, and along with therapy and keeping up with diet and exercise. And that kind of brings me to where I'm now. I don't at all have any suicidal thoughts, which is great. I'm in a very good place, I would say. I do have my bad days, but I'm able to cope with them and move forward. Throughout all this time, though, I had always been involved in the arts, which was something that definitely helped keep my mind off of a lot of the issues I was having, whether it was being involved in stage crew with the drama club in high school, or whatever art-related thing it might have been. Early on in my recovery process, I had gone to New York City to see a sculpture exhibit. And when I went there, and towards the middle of the event, I kind of had a realization. I kind of felt emotions that I've never really felt before, because I was still struggling with depression at that time, not being interested in a lot of things that I was already interested in. And when I was at that art exhibit, I had something came over me, and I had inspiration for a project that just came into my head. And I told myself that at that moment, I really want to make this project happen, because it included two things that are very near and dear to me, which is sculpture and my mental health. And so now we're 2 years later, I finally had the time to, put this project together and make it happen. It's called Under the Skin, a raw look at mental illness. And, I really hope with this project that it'll bring attention to mental illness in a very different way, something that will educate and inspire people and leave the community with a vivid and very lasting memory of what mental health and mental illness is. I really hope for it to be a very raw and emotional event, something that you really wouldn't forget. It's going to be a hyper-realistic sculpture exhibit, so as real as possible. And it's going to include real people with real illnesses and their stories. And I really hope it will create an impact on the community. I'm also really glad that I have already raised 50% of the funds that I need for the project. And I'm also really thankful for Team Up for Hope. They will be giving me a grant, which I really appreciate. That said, I'm still looking for donations. I'll share my website with you guys. You can check it out and read more about the project. And that's about it. That's my story.
Daniel, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. We're happy that we can help you, and thank you for giving people the inspiration of, this is what helped me. Maybe it could help you too. We do appreciate you being here with us. Our next presenter is Laura Hughes. She is from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Healing Conversations Program. After the death of her sister Allison due to suicide 10 years ago, Allison became involved with AFSP, which is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Currently, she's a board member for the Long Island chapter, specifically leading the healing and loss component. She is the coordinator of AFSP's Healing Conversations, a program for suicide loss survivors, as well as the coordinator for the upcoming International Survivor of Suicide Loss Day. The floor is yours, Laura.
Thank you. When I was asked to do the webinar, the fit between Healing Conversations and what AFSP does, and the time that I spend and other volunteers spend being a participant in that is really a very, very good fit. Understanding how to speak to somebody who has experienced a loss due to suicide is not always as easy as you might think. And it's really because suicide loss is very complicated. Watching a loved one struggle with the pain of losing somebody to suicide can truly make you feel very helpless. And you might want to reach out. However, you're really unsure on how to make them feel better. And at the same time, you might have concerns that you might make them feel even worse, or ironically remind them of their loss. So it's important to remember that really there are no easy fixes. There is no easy answers. One of the most important things you can do is to have a presence, to be a patient and non-judgmental listener, and just provide them with a safe space to to voice their anger and their frustration, their fears, in some cases their relief, or any emotion that they might be feeling. Just being a presence in their life as someone who offers them a space where there might be some solace is super powerful. So just as there are things that you can be doing, there's also things that are important that you do try not to do. And one of those is refraining from saying, I understand what you're going through. And because suicide loss is not like other losses, you truly cannot understand how the loss survivor is feeling unless you yourself are also a loss survivor. And that's okay, because just in the acknowledgement that you're not really sure, you don't fully understand, what you're doing is sort of validating the fact that it is a complicated grief. And although you may not know, it doesn't mean that you're not willing and able to perhaps help them. So it's important. It keeps the conversation open, and that's important. It's also important not to be specific and ask the person intrusive questions about how that person may have passed away. This is a very personal, very private information that they most likely will feel very uncomfortable sharing, and yet they might feel like they're being put on the spot. So it's important to really allow that person to guide you. If you were perhaps close enough that they needed somebody to share that with, that is something that they will bring up, and it's important to allow them to handle that. It's a slippery slope for a lot of people. It also is important, and Jeff, I think will you put the slide on with the refrain from offering? I think it's got the bullet list there. So it's important to refrain from offering unsolicited advice as well. A lot of times people feel that there are perhaps words of wisdom or colloquial sayings that people say, you're going to be fine. You're going to get over this. Everything happens for a reason. When you express your sympathies, it's so important that you not minimize the magnitude and the nature of the lost survivor's grief, because it is immense. And this is not something that people necessarily do on purpose. They never would want to hurt somebody, but it's important just to be cognizant of actually saying things like that might make the person feel uncomfortable, or make them feel that perhaps you were not genuine. Important also to be very careful when there are children that are affected by a suicide death, that it really is the loss survivors that are closest to them that need to determine what to tell them, how to tell them, and when. And when you offer unsolicited advice, such as, because it might be your personal belief that it might be, they might be too young in your opinion, or you might want to cover up the truth and not put them through a difficult and emotional moment, and just say it was an accident or offer advice. Never a good idea. It's really not your story to tell, it's their story to tell. And it's very important that they have control over particularly how they're handling their children. I know when my sister passed away, my children were young, and it was a very difficult decision to share with them. I did take a little time to regroup and understand what it is that I wanted to say. I also was very grateful to have some help with that through a survivor group that I found, and they actually aided me with that. And I chose the path of being very honest, so that there was nothing that they imagined in their brain that I perhaps might have appeared to have been covering up. So watching your choice of words is important. Not placing value judgments on the suicide as well is important. A lot of people might feel that it might make them, the suicide loss survivor, feel better to choose words that they might not realize are as hurtful. Something like referring to the suicide as a selfish choice, or as a sin, or as something that they were weak to do, or that they lacked faith or love or strength or any of those things, which is so far from the truth. And when you experience a loss due to suicide, you know your loved one well, and you know that that is probably the last thing that they wanted to do, was to ever hurt the people that they have left behind. And some people have a hard time seeing through that. They just want to comfort the person that is experiencing the loss. So, and just a side note on keeping with that, it's when we choose our words, one thing that at AFSP in particular we try to do is sort of, we're trying to change the verbiage a bit. By eliminating the word committed, what we're doing is we're changing, the vibes, so to speak. When someone dies by suicide, just like they might die in a car accident or they might die from heart failure, it is a death. However, when you say someone has committed suicide, you're sort of inferring that there's guilt there, that they've done something wrong. And so we try to change that verbiage. We feel it's really important that if people could learn to use the term died by suicide, it might help reduce that stigma and take that one small piece of the equation away. That is, stigma is very, very difficult to eliminate. We also have to realize that the person that is suffering, the suicide loss survivor, is trying to answer the questions of why and if they've missed something. And you never want to indirectly or directly have a conversation with somebody that might infer, even though you may not be doing it on purpose, that they are sort of responsible for the suicide, because that might be how it is taken, because they themselves are wondering where they might have fallen short. And to ask someone if perhaps you upset them, did you have a bad conversation? Was there something that was there that you didn't see? To do something like that, to have a conversation like that, it feeds the fears and the regrets and the all the things that the survivor's already struggling with, and perhaps even introduce new ones, new thoughts about this type of scenario, and can be very, very detrimental. When I'm doing a healing conversations visit, when someone contacts us, they've had a loss, and I'm meeting with them. Before COVID, it was in person, but we do a lot of, we do FaceTime now and telephone. The one piece of advice that I truly feel is very helpful, and there is really just to let them know that when somebody dies by suicide, it's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault when somebody dies by suicide. None of us would ever want to lose our loved ones. And we would have done anything and everything if we had known this event was going to take place. So it's not fair to place that blame on ourselves. And so just to remind the suicide loss survivors that it isn't anybody's fault when somebody dies by suicide, at times can sometimes really, be a relief for them. And then importantly, it seems like it's something that might be logical, but being proactive about offering help. Many times when someone is deep in their grief, they don't even know what they need, especially after the shock of the early days following. And you shouldn't wait for them to ask for help. Just figure out something that in perhaps their daily stresses of every day, you can help them with in the short term. Can you buy groceries for them so they don't have to go to the supermarket? Can you perhaps bring a meal over? Could you pick up the kids for them? Because it might not be something, they might not want to be in a schoolyard where they're surrounded by people that they don't want to have to explain what happened. People want to ask questions, and they might not be ready for that type of thing. So whatever kind of little thing that you might be able to do in their daily grieving process, especially in the beginning. It could even be just taking a walk together or just sitting. Sometimes they might just want somebody to sit. Offer it help repeatedly, and be specific. Making concrete suggestions shows that you're genuine, and when you're genuine, people are more likely to accept the help, and perhaps even reach out and ask for more help if they should need that. One other thing that's important is not being afraid to talk about the person who died. Many times, people will think that if they bring it up, that you'll be reminded that they passed away, that it might make you sad. All of these things are true. However, not speaking their name is more painful, and pretending that they're not even interested, or they're not bringing it up for whatever reason, is even more painful. I had a personal experience where good friends of ours, we saw them fairly recently after, and after spending a good amount of time with them, they never even brought it up. And it was so bizarre almost. It's not something that, people would hold against necessarily, but it was it was an interesting thing to notice that they were so uncomfortable and so worried and so distraught over what they should do. They chose not to do anything. And sometimes that silence can be more painful than a good cry, or, reliving a moment, by talking to somebody. So that's important too. Not placing a timeline on the loss survivor's grief is also important. It puts pressure on somebody to think that they need to move on when someone says you'll be fine, or you need to push past this, or time will heal. They're all expressions that when the person is not ready to move forward, when they haven't expressed their grief, if they haven't processed their grief in their own way, in their own timeline, is a very uncomfortable and stressful thing for them to experience. So, and then one other thing is not to disappear. Let's remember that after the funeral and the shock wears off of the full reality of what has happened, and it sinks in, that may be the toughest part for the loss survivor. And it's important to continue to check in with them. Let them know that you're thinking about them. Let them know that you're here for them. Encourage self-care. Encourage them to eat well and get enough sleep, and perhaps see a counselor. Reach out to other loss survivors is probably one of the biggest things that perhaps you can help them with. At AFSP, there's a lot of information that you can get, and a lot of things you can participate in. I've been volunteering for 10 years now, and I started out just putting stickers on the walk members, just as they registered. And I have now become a board member. I am the coordinator for the International Survivor of Suicide Loss Day, which is coming up. It's the Saturday before Thanksgiving every single year. It's typically a time when loss survivors come together so we can be in the presence of each other, so we can understand. I cannot emphasize enough that being in the presence of another loss survivor, someone who truly, truly understands what your pain is so incredibly powerful and so incredibly healing. And it's a game changer. Really, it's a huge game changer. And that's also what the Healing Conversations program is about. When we go and we visit, because we take it a step further and we even visit dependent upon the category of loss. So I will visit somebody who has reached out to AFSP and requested a visit if they've perhaps lost a sibling, because I can identify very specifically how they're feeling. Whereas I have other volunteers. There's 12 of us who might visit if someone has perhaps lost a child or lost a parent or lost a friend or lost a spouse, and et cetera, et cetera. And there really is great power and knowledge in sharing your stories, helping each other understand what your journey was like, what worked for you, what didn't work, or even similarities in understanding grief and how it appears. There's a lot you can reach out to for AFSP, as well as bereavement and support groups. You can type in a zip code and they can bring up in your area information about local. Unfortunately, with COVID right now, most of it is virtual, but you can get somebody on the phone too. You can talk to somebody, and you can do virtual support groups as well. There are a lot of people who have considered there to be a lot of success, and it's helped them a lot. And hopefully, we return at some point to in person, which is the greatest healer in my opinion. But until then, there's a lot to find, and also on the AFSP website. If you go to afsp.org/loss, you can find all of this. You can also find information about experiences, personal experiences, and lots of books, literature, learning about how people have dealt with what they're feeling when they're going through it is, again, not something, it is a different type of loss. And so when you are speaking with someone that might have a similar situation as you, it really is super powerful. So I encourage you, there's a lot out there that can help your loved one. Encourage your self-care for them, and again, for you as well. And hopefully it can ease the process a bit. So thank you for listening, and I hope journeys are go okay for those of you who are supporting somebody who's had a loss due to suicide.
Laura, thank you so much for that. It's very helpful to hear that there are tools out there that people that are dealing with the loss can use and utilize. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I know I've learned a lot from your presentation in regards to how to handle that sort of situation, because I can't share in that experience, but now I know more of how to handle people that are dealing with that loss. So thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Tiffany Magna. She is from our fundraising committee. Tiffany, I'm sorry, you're going to have to keep it short. We do have to take questions and other things at the end of the webinar. So the floor is all yours.
Short and sweet. So I'm an agent in the Warwick office, and I live here in Warwick with my family and children. And I'm amazed that you guys can share and speak the way that you do from a personal standpoint. I don't have that. I am just a regular Joe living in a community that I love, and looking onto Team Up for Hope as a way to give back to people in the community that have a huge need. And when I joined Team Up for Hope, I knew I'd be surrounded by awesome people, but I think I consider myself to be an intelligent person. Well, more than averagely intelligent, but I guess that's a matter of opinion. But I had no idea any of the statistics that I learned tonight, or anything about suicide at all, since that was just one portion of what we were doing. I mean, honestly, the only time I was thinking the whole time you guys were speaking, especially you, Daniel, that have I ever even had a conversation or heard anybody I know? And I think the only thing I could come up with in this hour is that watching a terrible movie on Lifetime, at the end of the movie, they say, if you know somebody who's thinking about suicide, and they put the number on the screen. Like, that's the only contact I've ever had in even knowing this was a problem. Those statistics blew my mind. So as a member of an organization just looking for people to raise money for other people in the community, it's not a Lifetime movie. You heard real stories from real people that are right here in our own community that have a huge need. And the crises are multiplying on top of the pandemic, and people need your help. So you don't have to know someone directly, just like I don't, in order to reach into your heart and your pocket and make a donation just to help somebody who's having a crisis. So you can do that by going on teamupforhope.org and making your donation tonight online, or you can do it on facebook.com/ or I think front slash, either slash, Team Up for Hope. And it doesn't matter how much you can give. We'll take any donation that you want to throw our way. Thank you so much. And I think it's question and answer time.
All right, great job, Tiffany. Thanks for doing that part, which is important. And yes, we do want to make sure that we do what we can, us individuals who are not in the day-to-day, doing what all these great people are doing to support them. And probably the easiest way that we can do that is financially. So when you give to Team Up for Hope, 100% of the funds are going to go directly to NAMI Orange, NAMI Sussex, and also a donation to Daniel Mcquaid's art project, which we're very excited about. Okay, so let's get into some Q&A here. I have a question from our own Wayne Patterson, who's on our Team Up for Hope committee. Danu, this is a question for you. So you could just go ahead and unmute your mic so you can speak. And the question is, if you're with someone that's talking suicidal, what's the best action to take? There was a lot of different recommendations for how to do this, but what would you do?
Okay, if it is a suicidal attempt, then I would definitely call 911 because it is an immediate danger. There is no time to wait when somebody is trying to attempt suicide. If it is a suicidal ideation, definitely I get the professional help, and that's also considered as an emergency. But I know suicidal ideations, they can talk to a trusted adult. Actually, I have the personal experience with this with a family member. I almost lost one of my family member. So it is a very devastating feeling, but definitely calling 911 if the situation is really, you cannot escalate the situation, it's dangerous, you've got to call 911. There's no time to wait. So this is what, if it is a suicidal attempt.
Okay, all right. Here's another question for Robert, coming also from Wayne. He said he didn't hear, but your stats on suicide with law enforcement was for all of the United States. I believe the answer is correct. Is that accurate?
That's correct, Jeff. It's for the United States.
Okay, very good. I guess there's a comment here. I'm not so sure that it's a question, but it says that the NAMI Orange website, NAMIOrangeNY.org, also has a separate web page called Police Mental Health. That includes a link to badgeoflife.org, which addresses mental health and suicide prevention. I wanted to mention that because I was curious to know if you were familiar with that website, Robert, badgeoflife.org.
Yeah, Badge of Life was the one, the project that started the suicide investigation. I was involved with it in the beginning, but it just became too big for me to stay with it. But I follow it. But back, as I said, back into 2017, they're the ones that instituted the investigations into the number of suicides. Because again, it was all over the board. We were guessing. No one had any hard statistics. And to be able to confront the problem, we needed hard numbers. So, we launched that. It was difficult, but the Badge of Life, hats off to them, terrific organization in the work that they do to address suicide in police officers.
Great, thank you. All right, and one of our participants, our attendees, I should say, Andrew Matthews, has just a couple comments. He says, thanks for sharing, and this was very inspirational to all of the panelists, so that was great. Daniel, question for you coming from an Andrew Gunn, who's also an attendee of the webinar here. Do you speak at schools? Andrew states that I'm sure there are a lot of kids who would benefit from your story. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about any experience that you have maybe with
I really haven't spoken at any schools. I'm definitely not opposed to it. Tonight was really probably one of one of the first times really ever sharing my personal story with publicly. But I think it needs to be said. It's definitely very nerve-wracking to share something so personal, but it needs to be said, needs to be brought up.
Well, I think you did a tremendous job. And I know that you had a lot of courage to be able to do it. And I've said to every panelist who's come on over the last 3 weeks, it is so important that you tell your story. It's so important because a lot of people won't, because there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of, anxiety about it. So for those who do have the courage and the ability to speak about it, not that other people don't, but you just seem to have it, and you have a gift about it, and you got to use that. So that's great. Keep on going. Mary Dumas made a comment saying, thank you very much for sharing as well. Okay, Laura, here's a question for you. It says, is your group and website information available to the folks at the 311 hotline? You are muted there, Laura, so you'll have to unmute your mic.
Absolutely. If you wanted to shoot me an email, I can forward all that information to you if you wanted to put it out there and share it. There's a chapter. There are 75 chapters of AFSP in the US. Some states like New York have many chapters. We have about, I think 6 in New York to cover different regional areas. And all of them have their own healing conversations program because a lot of times it's addressed geographically. So we cover in Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk County. But all you would have to do is go on to afsp.org/loss, and you can connect directly with the coordinator for the Healing Conversations program, or you can find out information about the International Survivors Suicide Loss Day. It's virtual. All you have to do is register. It doesn't cost anything. And there's lots of information that can follow by contacting those 2 specific areas.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Here's a question for Bob. Is it expected that the suicide rate for police will go up when the pandemic is finally over?
The feeling is, again, there's a lot of questions as to why the numbers went the way they went. But they're in the, if you look at veterans and police, when they speak of their PTSD and suicide, when they're in the midst of battle right now in the middle of this pandemic, you're too busy fighting to be involved with suicidal thoughts. You go from one scene to the next, to the next, to the next.
Yeah.
It's in those quiet times when the battle ceases, in the peacetime, that the gravity of this situation hits. And that's when you're going to probably, that's the thought of everyone that's looking into this, that once the pandemic ends, that the numbers will climb steeply.
Okay. Thanks for the information. Okay, so we have one other question. It's a little open-ended. It's not necessarily pointed to anyone in particular, but the question is, what are the telltale signs of someone contemplating suicide? I know that everybody kind of offered some advice on that, but would anyone just in real short want to give a response to that? Just
I actually have just a little input to say, there are your typical telltale signs, but then there also are signs that it pays to become educated about. And from personal experience, when I lost my sister, she had come by about 2 weeks prior, and she had brought me, we both played the guitar, and she had brought me her guitar and said that she was going to take a break and she wasn't going to be needing it right now. So could I hold on to it for her, which I found bizarre, but then at that point, it wasn't something I was educated enough to know was a warning sign. So giving away one of your most prized possessions and taking care of your items is a sure sign that someone is contemplating suicide.
Wow.
But little known.
I just got the goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I just, to parlay off that, and we can end it at this. I think it was Bob who mentioned a short 30-minute course on how to identify someone who's contemplating suicide. Is that correct, Bob? Were you the one?
That's, yeah, it's a checklist, the Columbia Suicide Severity Scale.
Okay.
It's you know, as I said, they give you scenarios.
Mm,
They'll give you questions. If you answer 10 out of the 10 questions, 8 correctly, then they allow you to use the scale in your work or in volunteer work that you're doing.
mhm.
It's always handy to have that checklist with you, because it's something you can work off of. We went through a lot of material tonight,
Mm,
and it's a lot to remember.
it
And
is, yeah.
whereas if you had this scale, this checklist in front of you, or kept it in your wallet or your purse, it gives you a little something to go off of. It's a handy tool to have.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope what we've accomplished tonight is a variety of informational sources, a variety of ideas on how to approach it in the best way that you see fit with your family and friends that you're dealing with who may be dealing with mental health issues. And I think that's what it's all about. You know, it's about bringing people together to just become educated on the subjects that we can hope that we slow things down as far as the rates of suicide, so on and so forth. So, okay, that's all the questions we had. So Karen or Nicole, I'll let you guys close it out.
All right. Well, I want to thank Daniel, Bob, Laura, and Danu for sharing your knowledge, your experience with us today. It is very much appreciated. This is our final 4 webinars that Team Up for Hope did in October, and there is a team of people that are working together at the Team Up for Hope. So I just want to acknowledge everyone who's been working behind the scenes to make this happen. Susan Wynn, Donna Roberts, Laura Chandra, Tiffany Magna, Wayne Patterson, Diana Clow, Amy Green. I just want to thank everyone on our team for getting this together, making it happen. In addition to that, we've had a lot of generosity, and we've had some very big sponsors. And said no donation is too big or too small, but to acknowledge some of our diamond and gold sponsors, Green Team Realty, Amy Green from Guaranteed Rate, Karen Gonin Real Estate, Really, and Springbrook Farms for sponsoring these webinars and helping us raise funds and awareness to some really, really important organizations. So thanks everyone, and thank you, Jeff. And Karen, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for all the information you've shared with us. It's been our pleasure to bring all this information to the community. To those of you that are watching the webinar, please share them. Make sure we get the word out. Team Up for Hope will be doing other things behind the scenes. We may be having other webinars in the future. So check back with us and see what we're doing. And again, just remember, if you do donate any money, it will go directly to both NAMI Orange and NAMI Sussex. We thank you for your time. Thank you very much, all of our presenters. Throughout the webinars, we appreciate your time and your knowledge. And stay safe, everyone.